They say blood is thicker than water, a bond that's supposed to be unbreakable. Loyalty, love, protection. But sometimes blood just leaves the deepest, ugliest stain. A stain that seeps into everything, tainting memories, shattering trust. I learned that lesson the hard way. I learned it staring at a grainy, flickering image on a small television screen hidden in my study, watching the impossible happen. Watching my own son, my only child, meticulously, deliberately try to poison me. One fake pill at a time. The timestamp in the corner showed it was last Sunday morning. There he was, my son Mark, standing in my bedroom thinking I was downstairs blissfully unaware, probably humming while I made my morning tea. He moved with a chilling casualness towards my nightstand, towards the plastic weekly pill organizer that held my lifeline. My heart felt like it seized in my chest, a cold fist clamping down. He opened it, popped out the small, white essential tablets for my atrial fibrillation. The ones that kept my heart beating steadily, the ones that kept me alive. He laid my real pills aside for a moment. Then he reached deep into the pocket of his stylish jacket and pulled out a small, nondescript plastic bottle. Inside, identical-looking white pills. Utterly worthless counterfeits. Placebos. He carefully counted them out, 7 fakes, and placed them into the organizer, filling the slots from Monday through the next Sunday. His movements were practiced, efficient. No hesitation. No remorse visible on his face in the dim light filtering through the curtains. My breath caught in my throat, sharp and painful. This wasn't the first time. This confirmed everything. The dizzy spells, the terrifying collapse, the hospital. It was all him. He gathered up my actual medication, slipped the precious tablets into that anonymous bottle and tucked it back into his pocket. He snapped the organizer shut, gave it a quick, almost instinctive wipe with his sleeve, erasing fingerprints, I realized with a sickening lurch, and placed it back precisely where I always left it. He glanced around the room, a fleeting, unreadable expression. Was that a flicker of satisfaction? Smugness? He thought he was so smart. So undetected. But he'd forgotten about the last incident. The one that nearly killed me. He never imagined I'd actually take steps, that the quiet, trusting mother he thought he knew had finally hardened. He never checked the innocuous little digital clock on the bookshelf across the room. The one with the tiny, hidden lens recording his every treacherous move. Oh, the rage began to build then, slow and hot beneath the icy shock. He had no idea. He had just signed his own social and familial death warrant. His world was about to come crashing down. Before this nightmare began, my life was blessedly ordinary. Predictably peaceful even. I'm Sarah, 62 now. My world shifted dramatically 5 years ago when my wonderful husband, Tom, passed away after a short, brutal illness. Our suburban home, once filled with his laughter and the comfortable rhythm of our shared lives, suddenly felt vast and echoing with silence. We'd built a good life here, raised Mark in these rooms. After Tom was gone, it was just me. I'd taken early retirement from my position as head librarian at the community library to be Tom's caregiver in his final months. A decision I never regretted, though it left me somewhat adrift afterwards. Readjusting to widowhood was a slow process. My days found a new, quieter rhythm. My sprawling garden became my sanctuary, the feel of the soil between my fingers grounding me. My weekly book club meetings were a lifeline to friendly faces and intellectual sparks. And, of course, there was managing my health. About 10 years prior, maybe 12 now, I'd received the diagnosis: atrial fibrillation. A tricky heart condition where the rhythm goes haywire, increasing the risk of serious things like stroke or heart failure. Sounds frightening, I know. But honestly, with the daily medication prescribed by my cardiologist, Dr. Evans, it was incredibly well managed. 1 small pill each morning with breakfast. That, combined with watching my salt intake and trying to avoid undue stress, easier said than done sometimes, but mostly manageable in my quiet retirement, kept me stable. More than stable, really. I felt healthy, active. I could still manage the demanding tasks in the garden, walk for miles, enjoy lunches out with my friends. The medication wasn't a cure, but it was my shield, my guarantee of continued normalcy, of waking up each day feeling, well, normal. It was just part of the routine, like locking the door at night. Simple. Until it wasn't. Mark, he's my only child. Now in his late 20s, trying to make his way in the competitive world of finance. Or at least that's the impression he gave. In the initial months after Tom's death, Mark was a rock. Or so I thought. He called almost every day, made sure to visit every Sunday without fail. He'd help with tasks that were getting harder for me, changing high light bulbs, carrying heavy bags of mulch for the garden. Just checking in, Mom, he'd say, offering a quick hug. Want to make sure you're doing okay on your own. His attentiveness felt like a balm on the raw grief. It was a tangible link to the life I'd had with Tom, a reassuring presence against the encroaching loneliness. I knew he was busy building his own life, navigating career pressures, getting serious with his girlfriend, Emily, a young woman who seemed genuinely sweet and down to earth whenever I saw her. He sometimes made comments about financial strain, rising rent in the city, wanting a newer car, the cost of impressing Emily, perhaps. But I dismissed it as typical young adult angst, the pressure cooker of modern life. I felt secure in my little bubble. My home was mine, mortgage-free. My health, while requiring management, felt under control. My son, despite his own pressures, seemed devoted. What danger could there possibly be? Looking back, the foundation of that security was terrifyingly hollow, built on assumptions I desperately wanted to believe. The first hairline crack in that foundation appeared so subtly I almost missed it. It was disguised as care, as heightened concern. Mark's visits became more frequent, less predictable. He started dropping by on weeknights. Was just in the area, thought I'd pop in, he'd claim, but his energy felt different. Tighter. More focused. Less like a casual visit, more like surveillance. And he began honing in on my medication routine with an intensity that felt new. Mom, did you remember your heart pill today? He'd ask, peering at my pill organizer. Are you absolutely sure you took it? Maybe double-check the box. Initially, I felt a pang of gratitude mixed with slight irritation. Was he worried I was getting forgetful? I certainly hadn't noticed any decline myself. But then his questions broadened, venturing into uncomfortable territory. How are you managing financially, Mom? Is Dad's pension really enough these days? And then more pointedly, have you thought about getting your will updated? Just to make sure. Everything's clear, you know. Felt prying. Calculated. Not like the open, easy conversations we used to have about practical matters when Tom was alive. There was a subtle sharpness in his tone, a flicker of something acquisitive in his eyes that unsettled me. I tried to rationalize it away. He's stressed about his own money, I told myself. He's projecting his anxieties onto me. He loves me. But then came the first physical sign that something was genuinely wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, maybe 6 or 7 weeks after his increased attention began. I woke up feeling off. Not sick exactly, but strangely heavy, almost drugged. A wave of dizziness hit me as I got out of bed, making the room tilt slightly. Later, while reading in my armchair, my heart gave an unpleasant flutter, a brief, jarring arrhythmia I hadn't experienced in years. I checked my pill organizer instinctively. Yes, the Tuesday compartment was empty. I'd taken my pill just like always. Must be a bad night's sleep, I reasoned. Or maybe I was coming down with something. Mark called that afternoon, his timing almost uncanny. Hey Mom, just checking in. How are you feeling? When I mentioned feeling a bit woozy and tired, his response was immediate, almost eager. Oh no. See, maybe you did forget your pill this morning. It happens. Or maybe the dose isn't strong enough anymore. You should really call Dr. Evans and ask about increasing it. His suggestion struck me as odd. He'd previously made vague comments about doctors over-medicating seniors. Now he was pushing for more? That evening, sitting alone in the quiet house, a cold tendril of unease snaked around my heart. It was just a fleeting thought, too monstrous to entertain for long, but it surfaced nonetheless. Why the sudden obsession with my pills, my finances, my will? Why did he seem almost hopeful when I mentioned feeling unwell? It felt like a betrayal even to think such things about my own son. I shoved the thought down, burying it under layers of maternal love and willful denial. But the seed of suspicion had been sown, finding fertile ground in the unsettling shift in his behavior. It lay dormant, waiting. The unsettling incidents didn't stop, They escalated, subtly at first, then with growing boldness. A few weeks after that first dizzy spell, Mark made his move regarding my medication directly. It was a Sunday visit. He watched me take my morning pill with breakfast, his gaze lingering. Later, as he was about to leave, he said casually, "You know, Mom, it must be a hassle keeping track of all those pills every week. Why don't you let me take over filling your organizer? It would give you one less thing to worry about." His smile seemed practiced, lacking its usual warmth. I felt a prickle of resistance. "Oh, Mark, that's very thoughtful, but honestly, I've been managing it for over a decade. It's really no trouble." I tried to sound appreciative but firm. But he pushed back, his tone hardening slightly beneath the veneer of helpfulness. "No, really, Mom. I insist. Think of it as my way of helping out more. It's easy for things to get mixed up, especially with the different pills you take. Let me handle it. I'll come every Sunday, sort everything out perfectly for the week ahead." His persistence felt wrong, like he was trying to take control of something deeply personal, something vital to my well-being. Arguing felt exhausting, though, and a tiny, treacherous part of me wondered if maybe he was just trying to be a good son, albeit clumsily. Maybe I was being overly sensitive. So, with deep reluctance, I agreed. From then on, every Sunday morning became a ritual. Mark would sit at my kitchen table, lay out my bottles, the crucial heart medication, my daily multivitamin, a calcium supplement for my bones, and carefully, methodically, distribute them into the 7-day plastic organizer. He seemed incredibly focused, almost obsessively meticulous. At the time, I tried to see it as diligence. Looking back, it was the concentration of a criminal perfecting his craft. Almost immediately after he took over this task, the unsettling physical symptoms began to return, and with more frequency. It wasn't constant but noticeable. Unexpected waves of lightheadedness while I was gardening. Sudden heart palpitations that would leave me breathless and clutching my chest, anxiety flaring. My energy levels, usually quite robust for my age, seemed to nosedive. Tasks that were easy before now felt draining. I, who loved puttering around my house and yard, found myself needing frequent rests, feeling a pervasive sense of weakness, of fragility. It was a feeling I hadn't known since the very early days before my condition was properly diagnosed and treated. Concerned, I made another appointment with Dr. Evans. He listened patiently, ran another EKG, ordered more blood work. And again, frustratingly, everything came back within normal ranges. My thyroid was fine, my blood counts were good. Theoretically, the medication level in my system should have been therapeutic. "Sarah, sometimes atrial fibrillation can have breakthrough episodes even on medication," he explained gently. "Perhaps we're dealing with increased stress you're not fully aware of? Or maybe just an off period. Let's monitor things closely." He seemed hesitant to change the dosage without clear evidence. When I relayed these ongoing episodes to Mark, his reactions became a predictable pattern of subtle dismissal and gaslighting. "Are you sure it's not just anxiety, Mom?" he'd ask, his brow furrowed with counterfeit concern. Or, "Well, you are getting older. Maybe your energy levels are naturally declining. Sometimes even, perhaps you're focusing on it too much? You know how thinking about symptoms can sometimes make them feel worse." Each comment chipped away at my confidence, making me question my own perception of my body. Was I imagining it? Was I becoming a hypochondriac? Was this really just the inevitable decline of age? But instinct, that deep primal gut feeling, screamed otherwise. The timing was too coincidental. Why did the worst spells often seem to cluster in the days immediately following Mark's Sunday pill-sorting ritual? Why was he so quick to blame me or my age, rather than considering any issue with the medication itself, the very thing he now controlled? The suspicion coiled tighter in my stomach. A venomous snake. He was my son. The boy I raised, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose teenage heartbreaks I'd soothed. The idea that he could be intentionally harming me felt like a violation of natural law. It was unthinkable. Yet, the alternative, a series of bizarre, unfortunate coincidences perfectly aligning with his strange behavior, felt increasingly implausible. My denial was wearing thin. I started observing him more acutely, peering through the fog of maternal affection, searching for the truth I was terrified to find. The situation escalated from unsettling to terrifying about 3 months ago. It shattered any lingering illusions I held. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Mark had dutifully refilled my pill organizer the previous Sunday, his usual meticulous performance at the kitchen table. I took my pills with my toast and tea, feeling relatively stable, perhaps just a little more tired than usual. But by 10:30, while I was simply watering my houseplants, a terrifying wave of dizziness and nausea washed over me, far more intense than anything I'd experienced before. My vision blurred alarmingly. My chest tightened, constricted, and my heart, oh God, my heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my ribcage. Not just fluttering but slamming violently, erratically. Thump, 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 flutter, slam. I stumbled, dropping the watering can, splashing water across the polished wooden floor. I gripped the back of a dining chair, gasping for air that wouldn't come deep enough. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. Was this a heart attack? A stroke? My fingers felt numb as I fumbled for the cordless phone on the sideboard. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I managed to gasp out my address to the operator before my legs gave way, and I slid down the wall, collapsing onto the cool, hard floor. The world tilted, sounds became distant and muffled, like I was underwater. Darkness encroached at the edges of my vision. Through the haze, I heard the distant wail of sirens growing closer. Thank God. The paramedics burst in, their presence filling the room with urgent efficiency. Their calm voices, the check of my pulse, the oxygen mask they placed over my face. It was a lifeline in the terrifying chaos of my own body betraying me. As they were maneuvering me onto the stretcher, the front door flew open again. It was Mark. He must have heard the ambulance. His apartment wasn't that far away. His face was a mask of shock and panic. Mom. Oh my God, Mom. What happened? He cried out, rushing towards the stretcher. His eyes were wide, darting between me and the paramedics. Was that genuine fear I saw? Or was it something else? Guilt? Calculation? He grabbed my hand, his own feeling clammy. I'm here, Mom. It's okay. He rode with me in the ambulance, peppering the paramedics with questions, his voice laced with an anxiety that felt performative. Could it be her medication? He asked them, his tone urgent. I help her with it, but maybe the dosage is wrong? Should it be stronger? He was planting seeds, directing their focus. At the emergency room, it was a whirlwind of tests. EKG, blood draws, chest X-ray monitoring machines beeping steadily beside my bed. And yet again, maddeningly, the results showed no clear cause for such a severe episode, other than the atrial fibrillation itself running rampant. Dr. Evans arrived, looking grim and deeply perplexed. Sarah, this shouldn't be happening, he said, studying my chart with a frown. Your medication at the prescribed dose should be providing much better control than this. Are you absolutely certain you haven't missed any doses? I assured him, my voice weak, that I hadn't missed a single one. Mark, standing nearby, immediately chimed in, his voice ringing with filial duty. I make sure she takes it every day, doctor. I even fill her pill box for her every Sunday to avoid any mix-ups. He sounded so convincing, so caring. Dr. Evans nodded, seemingly accepting the explanation, perhaps suspecting non-compliance on my part despite my assurances. They kept me overnight for observation, stabilized my heart rhythm with intravenous medication, and sent me home the next day with strict instructions to rest and report any further symptoms immediately. Lying in my own bed that night, the familiar floral scent of my own sheets a stark contrast to the antiseptic smell of the hospital, the pieces didn't just click into place. They slammed together with the force of a physical blow. The recurring off spells. Mark's sudden, insistent takeover of my medication routine. His probing questions about my finances, my will, his overly dramatic performance during the emergency. His subtle suggestions to doctors that the medication wasn't working or the dose was wrong. It all painted a picture so horrifying, so utterly monstrous that my mind recoiled. Could Mark, my Mark, be deliberately making me sick? Could he be swapping my pills? Trying to incapacitate me? Or worse? The motive hung there, suspended in the terrifying silence of my bedroom. Inheritance. My paid-off house, A comfortable nest egg from Tom's life insurance and my own retirement savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to be tempting, apparently. Enough for my own son to risk my life? Was his financial situation that desperate? Was his greed that consuming? Nausea churned in my stomach. But the alternative, that this terrifying collapse, coupled with all the preceding strangeness, was just a series of random, unconnected misfortunes, felt insultingly naive now. That trip to the hospital wasn't just a scare. It was a warning. A final, brutal severing of the trust one had clung to so fiercely. I was alone in this. I couldn't rely on Mark, obviously. I couldn't even fully rely on doctors who seemed unable to see past the surface. I had to protect myself. I had to find irrefutable proof. The very next morning, my hands shaking slightly but my resolve firm, I went online and ordered the best-rated nanny cam I could find, one cleverly disguised as a functional digital alarm clock. It arrived 2 days later. Setting it up on the bookshelf facing my nightstand felt like planting a bomb. I carefully hid the tiny wire, positioned the clock just so, ensuring the lens had a clear, unobstructed view. Now the agonizing wait began. Part of me prayed desperately that the camera would reveal nothing, that I was catastrophically wrong. But a colder, clearer part of me knew what I was likely to find. An uneasy quiet descended for the next couple of weeks after the camera clock took its silent post on my bookshelf. Mark came for his Sunday visits, performed his pill-sorting ritual under its unseen gaze. He was solicitous, asking about my recovery, urging me to take it easy. And strangely, I actually started to feel better. Markedly better. The dizziness vanished, the palpitations ceased. My energy returned. A treacherous flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe the hospital scare had frightened him? Maybe he'd stopped whatever he was doing, realizing he'd gone too far? Or perhaps I had been wrong all along? Maybe it truly was just a random health blip, and my suspicions were the paranoid delusions of a frightened, grieving widow? Oh, how desperately I wanted to believe that. But the reprieve was short-lived. Last week, the familiar, dreaded symptoms crept back in. It started subtly on Monday, an unusual wave of fatigue hitting me mid-afternoon. Tuesday brought a fleeting flutter in my chest while I was reading. By Friday morning, just 5 days after Mark's most recent Sunday refill, I felt unequivocally awful again. Not collapse on the floor awful, thank God, but significantly unwell. A profound weakness settled in my limbs, breathing felt like an effort, and my heart kept doing that unnerving, irregular dance that radiated anxiety through my whole body. I spent most of the day confined to my favorite armchair, sipping weak tea, feeling miserable and increasingly angry. Mark's obligatory check-in call came around noon. "Hey Mom, how's the day treating you?" His voice was infuriatingly cheerful, breezy. "Not so good, Mark, actually," I replied, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Feeling quite breathless again today and just wiped out. There was a fractional pause on the line. Then came the predictable deflection. "Oh, that's a shame. Did you maybe push yourself too hard yesterday? Remember what Dr. Evans said about resting. You really need to listen to your body." No real empathy. No suggestion of concern about the medication. Just the implication that it was somehow my fault. That was the moment the last shred of doubt evaporated. The fragile hope shattered. He hadn't stopped. He was still doing it. The brief period of feeling well must have been a fluke. Or perhaps he'd skipped a week to lull my suspicions after the hospital stay. My hand felt heavy, clumsy as I reached for the small remote control for the monitor I'd connected to the nanny cam's receiver in my study. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of dread and grim purpose. It was time. Time to face the ugly, undeniable truth. With trembling fingers, I navigated the device's menu, my breath catching in my throat. Playback. Select date and time. Last Sunday morning. Around 9 a.m. And there he was. The image was slightly grainy, the colors muted in the bedroom's morning light, but the actions were devastatingly clear. Mark, my son, moving with that chillingly familiar purpose towards the nightstand. I watched, frozen, barely breathing, as the scene I had dreaded played out exactly as my darkest fears had imagined. He opened the pill organizer. Carefully, precisely, he tipped out my actual heart medication tablets. The small, white, scored pills that regulated my life. He placed them in a neat little row on the dark wood of the nightstand. Then the reach into the jacket pocket. The appearance of the small, unlabeled plastic bottle. The contents shaking slightly as he opened it. Pills that were visually indistinguishable from my own. He counted out 7 of these fraudulent tablets. One by one he dropped them into the compartments, Monday's slot, then Tuesday's, all the way through to the following Sunday. His face, caught in profile, was intent, focused, like someone performing a routine, albeit illicit, task. Then the switch. He carefully gathered up my real pills from the nightstand. He slipped them into the now empty fake pill bottle he'd brought, screwed the cap on tightly and slid it back into his pocket. Gone. My lifeline stolen. He clicked the organizer shut. Paused. Wiped the surface quickly, almost furtively, with the cuff of his sleeve. Destroying evidence. Then placed it back in its exact position. He did a swift visual sweep of the room, his expression utterly neutral, before turning and walking out, whistling some tuneless little melody under his breath. I slumped back in my chair, the remote clattering to the floor from my suddenly nerveless fingers. A wave of nausea washed over me, colder and more sickening than any physical symptom he'd induced. It was real. All of it. My own flesh and blood. Systematically, calculatedly replacing my essential medication with inert fakes. Week after week after week. Actively working to make me ill, to destabilize my health, to endanger my very life. But the answer screamed in the silence. Money. My house. My savings. His inheritance. He couldn't wait for nature to take its course. The sheer, cold-blooded premeditation of it stole my breath. Tears finally came, not tears of sadness but hot, angry tears of profound betrayal. But beneath the scalding grief, something else was solidifying. A core of ice-cold fury. A steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. He thought he was manipulating a frail old woman. He had no idea who he was dealing with now. I meticulously saved the footage. Made multiple copies on different USB drives, hiding them securely. His little charade was over. Now it was time to write the script for the final act. And I would be the director. The days leading up to the confrontation were the longest, most agonizing of my life. I was living a double existence. On the outside, I had to be the recovering, slightly frail, loving mother. Inside, I was a cauldron of simmering rage, meticulously plotting Mark's downfall. Every phone call from him was torture. "Feeling stronger today, Mom?" he'd ask, his voice dripping with the false sweetness that now curdled my stomach. "That's good to hear. Just take it slow." Each feigned word of concern felt like a physical blow. I forced myself to play along, my voice deliberately pitched a little weaker than it was. "Trying my best, dear. Maybe just a quiet weekend." Keeping up the pretense was exhausting, nauseating, but absolutely crucial for the plan to work. I knew instinctively that confronting him privately would be futile. He was a master manipulator, a practiced liar. He would deny everything, twist the narrative, maybe even try to destroy the evidence or claim I'd doctored the footage. No, his exposure needed to be absolute, public, and witnessed by people whose opinions mattered deeply to him. His carefully constructed image of the devoted son, the successful provider-to-be, needed to be shattered beyond repair. And then the perfect opportunity presented itself, practically gift-wrapped. For weeks, Mark had been talking about arranging a dinner. He wanted me to host his fiancée, Emily, and her parents, John and Carol. He spoke of wanting our families to properly connect, wanting Emily's parents to see how close we were, how much he looked out for his widowed mother. The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it almost made me laugh out loud. This dinner wasn't about connection. It was about performance. His performance. It was the perfect stage for his unmasking. I waited until Wednesday, giving myself time to gather my strength and finalize my preparations. Then I called him. "Mark, darling," I began, injecting a warmth into my voice that felt like swallowing poison. "I was thinking about that dinner with Emily and her lovely parents. I'm feeling quite a bit better this week and I'd really love to host them properly this Saturday. Would that work?" His response was immediate, enthusiastic. Mom, that's fantastic news. Are you absolutely sure you feel up to it? We can always do it another time if you're not. The counterfeit concern flowed effortlessly. No, I'm quite sure, I insisted brightly. It would do me good to have some company. Let's say 7 o'clock. He readily agreed, sounding genuinely pleased, likely already picturing how well the evening would reflect on him. Little did he know. Saturday dawned crisp and clear, a beautiful autumn day that felt utterly incongruous with the storm I was about to unleash. I spent the day in a state of focused activity, a strange calm settling over the turbulent emotions beneath. I roasted a chicken, his favorite. Made creamy mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with crispy onions, all the comfort foods he associated with home with my care. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I set the dining room table with the good china, the silverware polished, candles ready. The house looked warm, inviting, deceptively normal. Inside, my stomach twisted into knots of nervous anticipation, but my resolve was granite. I had the crucial USB drive tucked safely in my pocket, the living room television connections double-checked. Showtime was approaching. They arrived precisely at 7. Mark, playing the role of the charming, dutiful son to perfection, ushered them in. Emily, looking radiant, offered me a shy, sweet smile. Her parents, John and Carol, seemed like genuinely nice, unassuming people. John, a retired history teacher, Carol, a gentle-faced accountant. They presented me with flowers and a bottle of wine, their warmth making the deception feel even more vile. We gathered in the living room for drinks, the air thick with Mark's self-congratulatory chatter. He regaled them with anecdotes, painting himself as the ever-present support in my life, managing my affairs, worrying constantly about my health. Family is everything, he declared solemnly at one point, placing a proprietary hand on my shoulder. I merely smiled, a serene mask hiding the tempest within, letting him weave his own noose. Emily gazed at him with open adoration. Her parents nodded, clearly impressed by this image of filial devotion. Dinner itself proceeded with excruciating normalcy. We talked about the weather, Carol's quilting hobby, John's upcoming fishing trip. Mark dominated the conversation, subtly boasting about a recent deal at work, sketching a picture of imminent success and stability. I ate little, my appetite non-existent, contributing polite murmurs when required. Waiting. Watching the clock. Finally, dessert was served, homemade apple pie, another deliberate choice, another echo of a happier past he had irrevocably poisoned. As I placed the last slice on a plate, I knew it was time. I cleared my throat and the light conversation faltered. Before we move back to the living room for coffee, I announced, my voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the comfortable lull. All eyes turned to me. Mark looked up, a forkful of pie halfway to his mouth, a slight frown creasing his brow. There's something I feel I need to share, I continued, my gaze sweeping across the table, lingering on Emily, then her parents. Something important about Mark. About the care he's been showing me. Mark's frown deepened. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom? What is this? He asked, attempting a light, puzzled tone. It's something you all deserve to see, I said, pushing my chair back and standing up. My legs felt surprisingly strong. Especially you, Emily. John, Carol. Please, just come into the living room for a moment. Confusion flickered across their faces, but they rose and followed me, drawn by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Emily shot Mark a questioning glance. He forced a strained smile. Mom, seriously, what's going on? Are you feeling all right? He asked again, a nervous edge creeping into his voice. I didn't answer him. I walked directly to the large television mounted on the wall, the USB drive already in my hand. I had to install a hidden camera in my bedroom a few weeks ago, I stated calmly, turning to face the small, bewildered group. Mark's face visibly blanched. His eyes darted instinctively towards the hallway leading to my bedroom door, then back to me, wide with dawning panic. He knew instantly which camera I meant. After I collapsed and ended up in the hospital, I started to have some serious concerns about what was happening. I plugged the USB drive into the port, picked up the remote. My hand was perfectly steady now. The cold fury had burned away every trace of fear. Concerns about my medication. Concerns about Mark. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing the grainy but undeniable footage from my bedroom. The sound was low but clear. The distinct clicks of the plastic pill organizer opening, the rustle of Mark's jacket as he reached inside. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. I turned my attention from the screen to the faces of my audience. Emily's initial confusion quickly melted into horrified disbelief. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes, wide and glistening with tears, locked on the image of her fiancé meticulously swapping pills. John's relaxed posture vanished. He stiffened, his expression darkening with bewildered anger. Carol gasped softly, exchanging a look of utter shock and revulsion with her husband. Mark looked like he'd been physically struck. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, pasty gray. A fine sheen of sweat broke out on his forehead. He began shaking his head, a frantic, jerky movement. "No," he whispered, then louder, his voice cracking. "No. That's not right. What is that? Mom, what trick is this?" "A trick." My voice was ice. Pure, shattering ice. "Was it a trick when I collapsed right there on the kitchen floor, Mark? Unable to breathe? Was it a trick when the paramedics rushed me to the hospital? Was it a trick every time you visited, feigning concern while secretly swapping my vital heart? Medication, the pills prescribed by my doctor to keep me alive, with useless sugar pills you bought online? Every single week." The video played relentlessly on. The damning evidence unfolded frame by frame. The careful removal of the real pills, the substitution with the fakes, the concealment of my actual medication in his pocket, the deliberate wipe down of the container. His casual betrayal, stark and undeniable. I don't, that's not what it seems." Mark stammered, his eyes darting desperately between Emily and her parents, seeking any flicker of belief, finding none. It's edited. Someone faked this. Mom, why are you doing this to me?" His desperation was palpable, pathetic. Emily finally turned to him, tears streaming unchecked down her pale face. "Mark." Her voice was barely a whisper, choked with heartbreak and disgust. Tell me this isn't real." "Of course it isn't, baby." "No." He reached for her hand, a pleading gesture, but she recoiled as if burned. "Your mother, she's not well. She's been confused lately, paranoid," he insisted, grasping at straws. "Oh, I've been unwell, Mark." I cut him off, my voice sharp as broken glass. "Thanks to your efforts. But I assure you I am not confused. And I am certainly not paranoid." My gaze shifted to John and Carol, their faces masks of cold fury and disbelief. "He stood to inherit everything you see. My house, my savings, Tom's insurance money. Apparently, waiting for me to die naturally was taking too long for him." Carol let out a small choked sound. John took a step towards Mark, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "You vile creature," he spat, his voice thick with contempt. "You tried to harm your own mother, for money?" Mark visibly flinched, backing away, eyes wide and frantic like a cornered animal. "No, it wasn't like that. I swear. I was worried the dose was too strong. I thought maybe I could gently taper it down myself. To help her." The lie was so flimsy, so transparently self-serving, it was almost laughable. "Taper it down?" I challenged, stepping forward myself. "By secretly replacing prescription medication with counterfeit pills? Without informing me? Without consulting my cardiologist? Does that sound like responsible concern, Mark? Or does it sound like a calculated, cowardly attempt to induce a medical crisis? Perhaps even attempted murder?" The ugly phrase hung in the air. Emily sobbed openly now, turning into her mother's embrace. Mark opened his mouth, searching for another lie, another excuse, but found nothing. The video concluded, leaving his treachery exposed in the horrifying silence. His world, his carefully constructed facade, his future, all lay shattered at his feet, witnessed by the very people he'd tried hardest to fool. The shame, the humiliation, the utter, irreversible ruin washing over his face in that moment. That was the core of my revenge. Served cold and with devastating precision. The silence that followed the video felt heavy, charged with revulsion and disbelief. Then John, Emily's father, broke it. His voice was low, tight with barely controlled rage, but his words were clear and final. "Mark," he said, not even looking directly at him but fixing his gaze somewhere past his shoulder. "Get your things out of my daughter's apartment tonight. And then you stay away. Away from Emily, away from Carol, away from me. If I ever see you near my family again, well, just don't." It wasn't a threat exactly, but a statement of absolute fact, carrying immense weight. Mark stood frozen for a moment, his face a wreck of shock, shame, and dawning despair. He opened his mouth, perhaps to plead or protest, but seemed to realize the utter futility of it. He couldn't meet Emily's tear-streaked gaze, nor the icy stares of her parents. He finally turned, shoulders slumped in defeat, grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair, and stumbled towards the front door without a word, without looking back. The sharp click of the latch as the door closed behind him felt like a final punctuation mark on that chapter of my life. Emily's parents were incredibly kind amidst their own shock. Carol held her sobbing daughter, murmuring reassurances, while John expressed his profound apologies for Mark's monstrous behavior, his disgust evident. "We had no idea, Sarah," he said, shaking his head. "No idea what kind of person he truly was." Emily, though heartbroken, found a core of strength. Through her tears, she told me she was ending things immediately and definitively. They didn't stay long, promising to arrange for Emily's things to be collected without her needing any further contact with Mark. As soon as their car pulled away, the adrenaline that had sustained me crashed, leaving me feeling hollowed out and shaky but strangely calm. Cleansed almost. My first action was decisive. I picked up the phone and called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation calmly, logically, detailing the medication tampering, the hospital incident, and the existence of the clear video evidence. They took it very seriously. An officer came to take my statement and collect a copy of the USB drive that same evening. Mark was arrested the following day. The wheels of justice turned slowly, and the legal process was draining, forcing me to relive the betrayal repeatedly through statements and eventually testimony. But the video evidence was incontrovertible. Mark's attempts to paint me as confused or vindictive fell flat against the cold, hard proof of his actions. He was ultimately charged and convicted on multiple counts, including endangerment and unlawful tampering with prescription drugs. The judge, citing the calculated nature of the crime and the profound breach of trust, handed down a significant prison sentence. I heard through the grapevine that he lost his job immediately upon arrest, his financial career over before it truly began. He tried, through lawyers, to offer apologies, to seek forgiveness. I refused all contact. Forgiveness was not mine to give for what he had done. He was no longer my son in any meaningful way. He was simply the man who had tried to steal my health and my future. Life now, it's rebuilt. The foundations are different. Stronger. I'm vigilant about my health, back on my correct medication, feeling physically well again. Dr. Evans was appalled when I finally told him the full story, and we work closely together now. I've taken practical steps, new locks, a comprehensive home security system that isn't hidden. The peace I cultivate now isn't based on naive trust, but on secure boundaries and self-reliance. The garden thrives under my care. My book club friends rallied around me with quiet support. The scar of Mark's betrayal remains. Some wounds, especially those inflicted by your own child, never entirely disappear. There's a lingering sadness, a grief for the son I thought I had, the relationship I thought was real. But overshadowing that sadness is a profound sense of justice, and a newfound respect for my own strength. Exposing his darkness, ensuring he faced tangible consequences for his horrific actions, wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. Reclaiming my safety, my health, my narrative, my life. I learned that even in the face of unimaginable deceit, resilience can bloom. And sometimes, the most satisfying victory is simply surviving, thriving, and knowing you took back control.